Everyone seems to have their version of what went down. They've already labeled me the villain. No hesitation, no questions asked. I've heard it all. Cold, unfaithful, selfish. And honestly, I'm done trying to explain myself to people who already made up their minds. But if you're going to judge me, at least hear my side before you do. I'm Erica. I'm 28. And no, I'm not sorry for choosing what finally made me feel alive. David and I were together for 6 years. That's a long time to share your life with someone, especially when everything looks perfect from the outside. At first, it actually was good. Sweet, steady, everything you'd want if you're going by the book. But that's the thing. Real life isn't a checklist. And staying in something that looks good but feels hollow, that slowly chips away at you in ways no one talks about. David is the kind of guy people dream about on paper. He's kind, respectful, checks in constantly, brings you soup when you're sick, sends good morning texts without fail, and always makes sure you're okay. Which sounds amazing, right? Until you realize that being constantly cared for isn't the same as being deeply seen. While his attention stopped feeling like love and started feeling like supervision. Like I was being handled, not loved. Protected to the point of suffocation. Around our first year, I started to feel it. That quiet sense of emotional fatigue. The intimacy between us had already started fading, and I couldn't bring myself to fake interest anymore. So I made excuses. I'd say I wasn't feeling well, or that my jaw hurt, and technically that wasn't a lie. My jaw does click when I'm stressed, but the truth? I wasn't physically checked in. I wasn't emotionally there. I was showing up, but I wasn't present. David never questioned any of it. He never pushed, never looked deeper. He just nodded, told me he understood, and moved on. That's who he is. Always accommodating, always accepting. Even when things were clearly slipping between us. I thought I wanted someone who would be gentle with me. And I did, for a while. But eventually, that gentleness felt like apathy. Like I could vanish into silence, and he'd just keep talking softly to the empty space where I used to be. By the 3rd year, we had this routine where physical connection only happened on special occasions. Holidays, anniversaries, stuff like that. A handful of times a year, and every single one felt rehearsed, obligatory. And the wildest part? He was grateful. Genuinely thankful. Like I was doing him a huge favor just for showing up at all. That kind of dynamic wears on you. You start to wonder, is this it? Is this what love is supposed to feel like? And the more I watched my friends in their relationships, the ones that had spark, chemistry, urgency, the more I realized what I was missing. I wasn't being desired. I was being appreciated. And let me tell you, there's a difference. A big one. David was successful. He had a solid job in tech, good benefits, no financial stress, and we each had our own place, which was non-negotiable for me. I needed my space. The idea of waking up every single morning to that same gentle concern in his eyes, it made my chest tighten, and not in a good way. He kept suggesting we move in together after our 3rd year, said we'd save money, grow stronger, all the usual lines. But I always found reasons to delay it, because honestly, living with him full-time felt like the fastest way to lose myself, completely. Our friends thought we were this ideal couple, predictable, reliable, stable. I never corrected them. It was easier to let them believe in the illusion than to explain how numb I'd become. And David's friends? They adored me. Especially Dominic. He was always a little extra friendly, but David never seemed to notice. Or maybe he just didn't want to. Dominic had a personality that could light up a room. And next to him, David, felt faded, like background noise. I played the part, though. the supportive girlfriend. The one who laughed at their inside jokes and asked about their boring work gossip and nodded through sports talk I didn't care about. But inside, I was drifting. I was performing. And the worst part? I knew no one in that room would ever just accept a "my jaw hurts" excuse without blinking. If they wanted something, they'd make it exciting. They'd make me want it. Not David. He'd just switch topics, like we were planning what to order for dinner. There's this thing people don't want to admit, that sometimes love changes. Not because someone cheats or lies or turns toxic. Sometimes it just runs, out, quietly, without fireworks. And instead of facing that, people double down on comfort, on what's familiar, on what's easy. But I couldn't do that anymore. I know people want to hear that I tried everything, that I fought to make it work, that I gave it one last shot. But the truth is, I was exhausted from trying to convince myself it was enough. And more than anything, I was tired of pretending I was happy. It wasn't David's fault that I needed something more intense, more alive, more honest. But it also wasn't my job to keep shrinking myself so he wouldn't notice. I needed more than soft touches and constant check-ins. I needed someone who could see me, not just care for me like I was a houseplant he didn't want to forget to water. And before you say I should have just left, I hear you. But you try walking away from someone who never yells, never cheats, never disrespects you. Someone who does all the right things, but still manages to make you feel completely unseen. There's no clean break from that kind of quiet disappointment. No single moment where it's clear. Just this slow unraveling that you keep ignoring because it doesn't make for a dramatic story. That's what people can't wrap their heads around. That I left someone good. That I walked away from comfort. But being good isn't the same as being right. And staying just because someone didn't do anything wrong, that's not love. That's settling. And I refuse to settle, just so other people can feel comfortable with my choices. So yeah, I'm the one who walked away. I'm the one who said it out loud. But I wasn't the one who let it die. I just finally admitted it was already gone. That's the part no one talks about. That sometimes choosing yourself means disappointing everyone else. And maybe that makes me the bad guy in their eyes. But in my own story, I finally stopped lying. I finally stopped pretending I was okay. And that was the first honest thing I'd done in years. It all blew up because of some photos. But what nobody realizes, what they refuse to even consider, is that those photos didn't accidentally show up. They didn't just appear on David's screen like some glitch or mistake. No. That folder? I put it there. Intentionally. And it had been there for weeks. But let me start with how it actually went down. Not the sanitized version David's been telling everyone. It was just a normal weekday. He was at work, and I was at his place, feeding his dog and just existing. I wasn't even supposed to be there that long, but the dog got sick, all over the bed, and after stripping the sheets and tossing them into a pile I had zero energy to deal with, I decided to just crash in the spare room. That's where his Apple TV was set up anyway, and I figured I'd distract myself for a bit. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't digging. I was bored. And then something popped up. A set of thumbnails. And behind those thumbnails was the truth that David would later pretend I stumbled on. Like I had no idea what I was looking at. But that folder? It was one I had created. It had a name only I would recognize. Subtle. Nothing flashy. Just one word. And tucked inside were months of memories. Pictures, clips, pieces of something I wasn't supposed to feel but couldn't ignore anymore. Evidence of a version of me that had come back to life. So no, what happened wasn't some shocking discovery. It was the inevitable crack in the facade I'd been holding together for way too long. What nobody's asked, not even once, is why that folder existed in the first place. Why someone like me, who had always kept things neat and under control, suddenly started documenting secret moments. And the answer is both simple and brutal. Because for the first time in years, I wanted to remember something. The first photo went in about 8 months before everything blew up. It was after one of those late afternoons where Dominic had dropped by to watch the game while David was stuck at work. We were sitting there on the couch and the TV was on, but we weren't really watching. We were just talking. You know, the kind of conversation where someone really listens. Not just nods along or waits for their turn to speak, actually listens. That was Dominic. He asked follow-up questions. He remembered things I'd said weeks before. He looked at me like I wasn't a puzzle to be solved, but a person to be known, and that shouldn't feel rare. But with David, it always did. That night, something shifted. I couldn't stop thinking about it afterward. The way he saw me, the way I felt around him. Lighter, sharper, more alive. And yeah, we started texting. At first it was harmless. Jokes, work complaints, stuff you send when you're bored. But slowly, the texts became something else. Personal. Thoughtful. Intimate in ways that had nothing to do with sex, but everything to do with connection. He noticed when I seemed off. He picked up on my moods even through a screen. And I'll be honest, I started putting more effort into my appearance when I knew he'd be around. Just subtle things. A different top. A little eyeliner. I told myself it was nothing. But the truth was, I wanted him to notice me. And he did. You can call that wrong if you want, but I'm not going to apologize for wanting to feel wanted again. The first time anything happened between us was about 6 months ago. David was out of town, and Dominic came over to drop off something. Or maybe he just said that was the reason. Either way, we ended up sitting on my couch, sharing a bottle of wine, and talking until midnight. Not small talk. Real talk. The kind of conversation I hadn't had with David in years. It wasn't planned. I didn't go into that night intending to cross any lines, but it happened, and it felt like waking up from a long, slow sleep. For the first time in so long, I felt seen, desired, taken seriously. Not tiptoed around, not handled, wanted. With David, even our most intimate moments had started to feel like obligations, like checking off a box. But with Dominic, everything felt different, urgent, magnetic. I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to fake excitement. My body responded without hesitation. That night didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like truth. And yeah, we kept seeing each other. Sometimes at his place, sometimes mine. Never at David's. I still had lines I wouldn't cross, even in all my chaos. People assume I took those photos to be reckless, to keep trophies. But it wasn't about that. I took them because I wanted to remember, because when I looked at those moments, I didn't feel like a monster. I felt alive. I felt real. I wasn't trying to get caught. But maybe part of me was done hiding. David and I hadn't been intimate in any meaningful way for years. Everything between us was polite, predictable, routine, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep showing up to something that felt dead inside. So yes, I created that folder. I placed it exactly where I knew it could be found, if he ever bothered to look. And when David walked through that door the day everything exploded, I knew the second I saw his face. Something was off. He looked like someone had told him his own favorite restaurant had closed permanently. Not angry, not shattered, just inconvenienced, mildly surprised, like this was a bad day, not a broken life. He sat down on the edge of the bed, looked at me with those careful, quiet eyes, and asked, "Can you explain what I saw on the Apple TV?" Not "what the hell is this?" Not "how could you do this to me?" Just, "Can you explain?" Even in the moment of discovery, he was still trying to protect my feelings. I told him the truth. No theatrics, No fake denial. I said yes. Those were pictures of me and Dominic. And yes, we'd been seeing each other. I thought it would break something open, that maybe, finally, he'd explode, raise his voice, demand an explanation. But no, he just sat there, quiet, nodding, as if I'd just told him I'd forgotten to buy the right brand of coffee. Then he asked the one question that shattered whatever was left of my sympathy. Is it because I'm not good enough at that stuff? Not why did you do this, or how long has this been going on? He wanted to know if he was inadequate. Technically, as if this all boiled down to performance metrics. I wanted to scream, not because the question was stupid, but because it missed the entire point. It wasn't about skills. It wasn't about ability. It was about presence, intention, desire. With Dominic, I never once thought about my jaw hurting or felt like I had to come up with an excuse. I wanted to be there. I wanted all of it. That was what David never understood. You can't teach someone to spark that kind of chemistry. You can't script passion. Either it's there or it's not. And with David, it never had been. He kept asking what he could have done differently. Kept saying we could fix it. That he just needed to understand what I needed. But that was the problem. If you have to ask how to want someone, you're already too far behind. After a while, I stopped answering. I stopped trying to explain, because this wasn't something that could be talked out or therapized. It wasn't about fixing a crack in the wall. The whole foundation was wrong. What happened that day wasn't a betrayal. It was a reckoning. The folder was never meant to hurt him. It was meant to wake him up. To say, look, this is what you never saw. This is who I've become, while you've been busy convincing yourself we were fine. But even in that moment, even with the truth staring him in the face, David stayed calm. Stayed gentle. Stayed exactly the same man I'd been slipping away from all along. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Because in the end, the photos weren't just a secret. They were a mirror. And what they reflected was everything we'd both been pretending not to see. The first time Dominic kissed me, it didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel like betrayal, or weakness, or some shameful secret I was going to carry for the rest of my life. It felt like finally breathing after holding my breath for years. And I wish that wasn't the truth. But it is. It started so gradually, so quietly, that by the time I realized I had crossed a line, I'd already been on the other side for weeks. Maybe months. The connection didn't show up overnight. It grew in small spaces, in glances that lasted a second too long, in text messages that started as casual and slowly turned personal, in conversations where I felt more heard in 5 minutes than I had in years with David. What Dominic gave me wasn't flashy. It wasn't grand gestures or soap opera drama. It was presence, attention. He saw me. I don't mean just noticing my outfit or complimenting my hair. I mean really seeing me. Picking up on my energy. Noticing when I was tired or tense without me saying a word. Asking follow-up questions that showed he actually remembered what I said last time. That kind of thing may seem small to someone who's used to it. But when you've spent 6 years with someone who thinks, "How was your day?" is enough to pass as emotional connection, it feels enormous. The irony? David is a good man. He's safe, solid. He never raised his voice, never disrespected me, never cheated. He did all the right things. But love isn't about checklists, and feeling safe isn't the same thing as feeling wanted. With Dominic, I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to monitor my reactions, or soften my opinions, or play the version of myself that made David feel secure. I could just exist. Messy, loud, curious, restless, all the parts of me I'd buried because they didn't fit into David's quiet, measured world. And I know people hear all this and think, "So you cheated because your boyfriend was boring?" But no, I cheated, if that's the word you want to use, because for the first time in so long, I felt like a woman again, not a roommate or a pet someone was afraid to upset. The night everything truly shifted was when David was out of town for a conference. Dominic texted to check on me, said David had asked him to make sure everything was okay, and that if I needed anything, he was around. And I don't know. Maybe David trusted him too much. Or maybe he never imagined that someone like me could do something like this. Dominic came over with a bottle of wine. We sat on the floor of my apartment, leaning against the couch, talking about everything and nothing. Careers, regrets, what we thought life was supposed to look like by now. It was one of those conversations that just unfolds naturally, where time disappears and everything feels weightless. At some point, I remember looking at him and thinking, this is what I've been starving for. This depth, this energy, this sense that I'm not just being tolerated or tiptoed around. When he kissed me, it wasn't some dramatic, passionate moment ripped from a movie. It was quiet, soft, like we both already knew where it was heading and just needed permission to stop pretending. And no, I didn't stop it. I didn't feel guilty or scared or torn. I felt awake. What happened that night wasn't a mistake. It was honest. It was messy and imperfect, but it was real. The days after that, I expected regret to crash in, but it didn't. If anything, I felt calmer than I had in a long time. The guilt I thought I'd drown in never came, because it wasn't about being reckless or cruel. It was about finally experiencing something that reminded me I still had desires, that I still had a pulse. Dominic and I started seeing each other more after that, always quietly, always carefully, never at David's place. I still had enough conscience left not to turn our shared spaces into a stage for betrayal. We didn't meet constantly, but often enough that a rhythm started forming. Sometimes it was just lunch. Sometimes it was hours spent tangled in sheets, saying things out loud we didn't know we were allowed to feel. With Dominic, everything was different. I never had to make excuses. I never once said, "I'm not in the mood," and forced a smile. I didn't think about jaw pain or faking enthusiasm or pretending I was comfortable when I wasn't. My body responded like it remembered something it had forgotten years ago, and it wasn't just physical. It was emotional. He made me laugh differently. He made me feel differently. He never treated me like a fragile project. He treated me like a woman, flawed, passionate, sometimes chaotic, but alive. We took photos, some of them intimate. Not because we were reckless, but because I wanted to remember. I needed proof that the version of me I was with him actually existed. That I wasn't just cold or numb or broken. That I could still feel this deeply about someone. I saved those photos not as trophies, but as reminders. That even if it didn't last, this part of me had happened. I didn't want to erase it. I wanted to honor it. I know how that sounds. I know it makes people uncomfortable. But I'm not going to rewrite it to make others feel better about my choices. Because here's the hard truth, and with David I was fading. With Dominic, I came back into focus. That doesn't mean Dominic was perfect. It doesn't mean what we had was sustainable or right. But it meant something. It meant everything in that moment. He made me feel wanted. Not for what I gave or how I behaved, but just for being myself. He challenged me, teased me, saw through me in ways David never could. I remember lying in Dominic's bed once, the sun coming through the blinds, his hand resting lightly on my back. I asked him without really thinking, "Do you think I'm a bad person?" He didn't hesitate. He said, "No, I think you've just been starving for too long." That sentence hit me harder than anything David had ever said in 6 years. Because he wasn't excusing what we were doing. He was acknowledging it, naming the hunger. And sometimes, when something's been starving, it doesn't make careful choices. It just grabs what it can. Maybe that's what I was doing. Reaching for something before I forgot what it felt like to want anything at all. People like to paint stories in black and white. You're either loyal or disloyal, good or bad. But life lives in the gray. And I lived in that gray with Dominic for months. Never lied to myself about what it was, but I also didn't expect it to change me the way it did. David always said he loved me because I was steady, reliable, loyal. But Dominic loved the parts of me I thought I had to hide. The parts that burned too hot for David's soft, steady hands. And that's the difference. David gave me comfort. Dominic gave me fire. And for the first time in years, I let myself choose the flame. Even if I knew it wouldn't last. Even if I knew I'd get burned. Because after all those years of being careful, of doing the right thing, of following the rules, I needed to remember what it felt like to break something wide open. And for a little while, Dominic helped me do exactly that. After David found the folder, things didn't just fall apart. They disintegrated. Not just between him and me, but in every direction. Friends, family, work. It's like the second he saw those photos, the entire world hit fast forward, on turning me into the villain of someone else's heartbreak. Within a week, people had already picked their side. And spoiler, it wasn't mine. It started with Jenna. She's been my best friend since college. We've survived breakups, awful roommates, job drama, everything. So when her name popped up on my phone, I actually thought, finally, someone who'll understand, someone who'll listen. Instead, she was crying for David, as if he was the one she'd known forever, as if he had just been blindsided by a cheating wife of 15 years, not a boyfriend I'd been slowly growing apart from for over half a decade. She didn't even ask what happened. She didn't want my side. She just kept repeating things, like he would have done anything for you, and how could you throw away something so real? And then came the dagger. You should have talked to him. You should have tried. Like I hadn't spent years trying. Years hoping things would change. Years silencing parts of myself just to keep the peace. Apparently that didn't count. The worst part wasn't her disappointment. It was how quickly she turned. Like one version of the story was all she needed to decide I didn't deserve understanding, just judgment. After Jenna, it was Sarah, David's sister. She sent this long, carefully worded text about how heartbroken she was. How she thought I was better than this. How devastated David had been since that night. She actually used the word devastated. That word didn't match the guy I sat next to when he found out. The one who looked more confused than hurt, more inconvenienced than shattered. Sarah went on, about family, about betrayal, about how Dominic, of all people, had been part of their inner circle, and how I should have considered what this would do to everyone. Like I was supposed to protect David's friendships even as mine were collapsing. She wanted to talk. She wanted closure. But what she really wanted was an apology I wasn't going to give her. Then there was Monica, my coworker, the queen of passive-aggressive, comments wrapped in fake empathy. It started with the looks, the whispering when I walked into the break room, the sudden silence when I'd pass her desk. Then came the actual words, stuff like, "Some people just don't realize how lucky they are until it's too late," and "Not everyone gets someone, like David, you know." This, from the same woman who complains every single day about her own husband. But sure, let's pretend she's the expert on relationships. She even tried to set me up, said she knew someone who'd be perfect for me. Recently divorced. Understands how complicated relationships can be. That's code for someone else who's been labeled damaged. I wanted to scream. People talk about fairness and grace and hearing both sides. But when it comes down to it, most people love a good victim story. They want someone to root for and someone to blame. And I made it really easy to paint myself as the problem. Because I told the truth. I didn't lie when David asked me what happened. I didn't twist it. I didn't pretend. I owned it. And I thought that would count for something. But it didn't. All it did was give people something neat and easy to hate. Poor David. He didn't deserve that. He was such a good guy. And he was. That's the part no one ever wants to hear me say, but I've never denied it. He was a good guy. He is. But being good doesn't make you the right person for someone. And it doesn't mean the person who leaves you is automatically bad. No one asked if I was okay. No one asked how long I'd been unhappy, or why I stayed so long, or how it felt to be slowly disappearing in a relationship that looked perfect from the outside, but felt like a quiet kind of death on the inside. Everyone just wanted to know one thing, why I did it. And if I didn't have a neat, noble answer, if I didn't say David hit me, or cheated first, or emotionally abused me, then nothing I said mattered. My own mother even chimed in. She called me with that voice she uses when she's trying to sound calm but isn't. She asked what David did to deserve it, as if there had to be some smoking gun to justify walking away. This, from a woman who's been married 3 times and once left a man because he didn't make her laugh anymore, but suddenly she's preaching about commitment and loyalty like it's gospel. I asked her, what if I just wasn't happy? And she said, then you should have tried harder to be. Tried harder. That's the theme, right? No one asks how long I tried, just assumes I didn't. And Dominic, he was supposed to be the one who didn't turn his back. He was the one who saw me, who made me feel alive, seen, wanted. The one who, for months, told me I wasn't crazy for wanting more than politeness and routine. He was there, texting me, telling me not to worry about the backlash, that we'd figure it out together, that what we had was worth the fallout. That lasted about 3 days. Then silence. Then short replies. Then excuses. He needed space. He felt guilty. He wasn't sure if starting something this way could ever be healthy. Healthy. That word. As if that was his concern when he was pulling my shirt over my head just weeks earlier, whispering things about how I deserved more, about how David never saw me for who I really was. Now suddenly it's all about ethics and morals and what's best for everyone. He didn't even have the decency to break things off directly, just slowly pulled away. Let the silence do the dirty work. I cornered him one night, showed up at his place, demanded a real conversation, and that's when I learned the truth. The real truth. He never thought we were anything serious. He thought I was just going through something. That eventually I'd work things out with David and this would all be a memory. I remember staring at him, wondering how he could lie so smoothly. How someone could talk about connection and chemistry and soulmates and then turn around and say, I never promised you anything. He said it would be better if we stopped talking altogether. That it wasn't healthy to continue. Better for who? Because it wasn't better for me. He said he hoped I'd learn something from this. That I'd find someone who could give me what I really needed. As if he wasn't part of the wreckage. As if he wasn't just as guilty, if not more, for making me believe in something that was never real to him. And so, there I was. Alone. Not just single. Alone. The man I left was rebuilding his life with everyone cheering him on. The man I turned to had disappeared the moment things got difficult. And the people who were supposed to love me through anything, most of them just vanished. They wanted me to fall apart, to regret it, to crawl back and say they were right. But I didn't. I didn't regret choosing something that felt real, even if it didn't last. I didn't regret telling the truth, even when it made people hate me. What I regret, deeply, is believing for even 1 second that anyone would care about my side of the story. Because when the world picked sides, they didn't pick mine. And that's when I learned something. I wish I'd known sooner. People don't want honesty. They want stories that make them feel comfortable. And women who choose themselves, even clumsily, even messily, don't fit into that narrative. It's been 3 months since everything fell apart. 3 months since the truth came out. Since Dominic disappeared. Since I became the person everyone whispered about behind coffee cups and closed doors. And the strangest part of it all is how fine David seems. Actually, more than fine. Thriving. While I've been unraveling quietly, trying to piece myself back together, he's been glowing like someone who just escaped a toxic situation. Except, apparently, I was the toxin. Friends, who wouldn't even make eye contact with me weeks ago, are now sharing photos of him smiling at rooftop bars, out on hikes, looking happier and lighter than I've ever seen him. They post things like, "So proud of you, man," and "Glad you're doing so well." Like I was the storm he survived. Like losing me was the best thing that ever happened to him. Meanwhile, I'm still dragging myself out of bed, still dreading. Small talk at work, still dodging Monica's judgmental glances, and avoiding Jenna's fake check-ins disguised as concern. The dating world? Don't even get me started. Every guy I meet either thinks I'm looking for a fling, because apparently once you've cheated, that's all anyone assumes you want. Or they treat me like a walking red flag asking too many questions too soon, already suspicious before we even order our drinks. And the ones who don't run the other way, I compare all of them. To David, to Dominic, every single time. I keep thinking, this one's too soft, or this one's all fire but no depth. I'm caught between what was too much and what was never enough. And it's exhausting. I thought maybe if I just gave it time, I'd feel relief, clarity. But all I feel is stuck, and the world hasn't made it easier. Not with the constant reminders. People love repeating that line. You'll grow from this. You'll learn something. Like I'm in the middle of some self-improvement saga, but you know what I've really learned? That people are fake. That the second you fall out of their perfect little mold, they'll leave you behind without blinking. And David, he really did leave me behind. I ran into him last week. Just a random afternoon. I was grabbing a coffee, trying to shake off another rough morning. And there he was, standing in line, laughing with someone. Some woman. Tall, blonde, outdoorsy looking. The kind of woman who probably joins hiking clubs and eats granola straight from the bag. She was smiling up at him, her hand on his arm like they were already comfortable with each other. And he looked happy. Not forced, not pretending. Just actually happy. When he saw me, he waved, smiled even. Like we were old coworkers who used to share a cubicle. No anger, no awkwardness. Just a casual, polite smile. Like our 6 years together were a footnote in his life. And it hit me, standing there holding a coffee I no longer wanted. I left him. I'm the one who walked away. And yet, it feels like he left me. He's lighter. Now. Freer. Like I was the anchor he finally cut loose. And maybe I was. Maybe being with me did wear him down, little by little. I won't pretend I was easy to love. But I also won't pretend I didn't try. I tried harder than anyone ever gave me credit for. I played the part for years. I smiled when I wanted to. Scream? I said I was fine when I wasn't. I ignored my own needs because I thought that's what love required. Sacrifice, compromise. But there's a difference between compromising and disappearing. And that's what I did, slowly, quietly, over time. I disappeared, and no one noticed. Not until I made a mess big enough that it was impossible to ignore. And now, when people talk about me, it's never with curiosity. It's always with certainty. Like they know exactly who I am and what I did and what that says about me. But the truth is, none of them were there. None of them saw what it felt like to be slowly unloved, not with cruelty, but with passivity. David didn't break my heart. He wore it down. And still, I don't hate him. I'm actually glad he's doing well. It stings, deeply. But I'd rather see him happy than dragging himself through the kind of numbness we both pretended wasn't there. He deserves someone who looks at his kindness and sees romance instead of restraint. Someone who finds his consistency reassuring, not suffocating. Someone who doesn't need fire to feel alive. And I don't even know anymore. I thought I wanted passion. And I still do. But I want it with presence, with loyalty, with honesty. Not just intensity for intensity's sake. Not what Dominic gave me. Not what David couldn't. I guess I want a middle ground that might not exist. And that's the hardest part. Realizing that maybe I wasn't wrong for wanting more. Maybe I just didn't know how to ask for it without tearing everything down. I keep thinking about how differently it all could have gone. If I had left before Dominic ever entered the picture. If I had ended things cleanly. If I had been brave, enough to say, this isn't working anymore without needing someone else to light the match for me. But I didn't. And I have to live with that. People say I destroyed something good. But they didn't see how quiet it had gotten inside me. They didn't see the version of me that was fading day by day. And now that David's happy, now that Dominic's long gone, now that the dust has settled and all the judgment has cooled into silence, I'm left with this one truth. I'm not sorry I wanted more. Even if it didn't work out the way I hoped. Even if I hurt people in the process. Even if I'm the only one still bleeding from it. Because now I know what it feels like to come alive, even for a moment. And I know what it costs when you don't. So no, I won't apologize for choosing passion over comfort. I won't take it back just because it made people uncomfortable. And if that makes me the villain in someone else's story, so be it. But I'd rather be hated for chasing something real than praised for pretending everything was fine. At least, now I know what it feels like to feel. And that, even if it was temporary, is more than most people ever get.